Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of the Utah Film Pod. My name is Josh Terry. I'm here with Dani Hatch and we've got some movie stuff to talk about. How you doing, Dani?
I'm doing pretty all right. You know, it's been a crazy little bit with the summer semester wrapping up, so stress is high, immune system is down. I was knocked out for a couple weeks in bed, but it gave me a lot of time to watch a lot of the stuff that we're going to be covering today, so I'm really excited.
So you're coming prepared, finding something to do to get out of the summer heat. Exactly.
No, it's been miserably hot. It's nice having a little bit of rain.
I've never been so excited to get a little bit of rain. But,
right?
But I'm excited about the movies too. So we got one big movie that we're going to be talking about, and there's plenty of stuff going on in the news, so how about we start off with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some exciting Utah releases we have this week. Specifically this weekend for Pioneer Day, we have the premiere of Echo People, a film by Utah's own Trent Harris that will be premiering at the Bicknell Film Festival. And I was looking up this film festival, and Bicknell is like a really, really small town, like a population of like 300 people, right?
Right.
I think it's so cool that they have their own little yearly film festival, and this film's really exciting, kind of for this niche crowd, but this is considered a sequel to Ruben and Ed, which you, Josh, have told me about. This is a very indie Utah kind of film that you really enjoy. Would you mind giving a little background on that?
Oh, sure. No, Ruben and Ed came out in 1991. It was kind of it's really very much the definition of a cult film, specifically kind of just within the Utah boundaries. I don't know if it's very well known outside of Utah, but it was filmed partially in Salt Lake, partially in Goblin Valley. If you have some familiarity with any of those areas, you'll recognize some things. Actually, the two main characters meet right in front of a building that I worked in for 5 years, and of course Goblin Valley is very iconic. There's some crazy stuff going on there, and it's just this weird kind of buddy comedy about this mismatched couple of guys. One is played by Crispin Glover, you know, from Back to the Future. The other one's Howard Hessman, who had a big role in WKRP in Cincinnati years ago, the TV show. And the two of them basically drive out in the middle of southern Utah to bury a frozen cat. And that's I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's essentially no. And just it's actually quite funny, because if you've seen the clip on YouTube where Crispin Glover goes on David Letterman and almost kicks him, he's in the Ruben character for that, with the kind of like the long strange wig and the striped bell-bottom pants and the crazy elevator shoes. That's always been kind of a very mysterious chapter from many people's lives, David's and Crispin's, of course. But there's more of a connection there, and if you've seen Ruben and Ed, it makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, so it's cool that we're going to be getting a sequel to Ruben and Ed 30 years later.
Yeah, no, all these years later, it's kind of shrouded in mystery a little bit. There's not a lot about the plot. It's not on IMDb, so who knows if there's a return of the characters, but it seems like a really exciting thing to be shown at a very small film festival this weekend. So that'll be fun to check out. If any of you do go and see it, please let us know if you enjoyed it. So
absolutely, yeah. Bicknell's just down by the Capitol Reef area, down through Torrey, if you've been through that area, and pretty cool place to have a film festival, I'd say.
Yeah, well, it's a good spot. Something else we have in the news section, we talked about The Chosen a little bit last episode, because the final episode for season 2 was premiering when we were releasing that episode, and so I was able to finish season 1. I had started it a little bit ago and got to finally finish that and just binge watch all of season 2 in just a couple of days, which was kind of an incredible experience. It's a very emotional, impactful show, so I was really, really impressed by what I saw, and I'm curious, Josh, what you think of it. I have a review on the Utah.film website about my thoughts, but I was wondering what you thought of it.
Well, so I'm not quite as far along as you are. I'm still back in season one. But what I've seen so far has been really impressive. Of course, I've been hearing about it for a while now. I've had many
Hmm.
people recommend it to me, and uh, for a variety of reasons. One of which is that hey, it's recorded or it's filmed in Utah,
Oh
so
yeah.
there's kind of the local connection. One of my initial takeaways from it was just that the acting's really quite good. I know that
Hmm.
if we're being honest, when it comes to smaller, low budget, productions, a lot of times it'll be kind of obvious that some of the actors are not at the not the best, and it's a little obvious that there's some stiffness. And I remember getting through. In fact, I think it was at some point in the second episode, I just realized that the acting hasn't been distracting at all here. I'm just immersed in this. I'm just kind of watching it like a regular TV show. And so, I mean, it's still apparent that it's a smaller budget production, right? I mean, especially when you think about the biblical epics of the 1950s. It was all about
Hmm.
kind of the grandeur of the scale and the cast of thousands and all this. And this is a much more intimate production where it looks really good, but you're kind of seeing smaller venues and smaller interactions between just a few characters. But of course, there's an advantage to that, and I think that it's doing a nice job of exploring its subject matter, which of course is the New Testament. I mean, it's set during the time of the Gospels, but it's not just a retelling of the Gospels, right? It almost seems like it's happening parallel to a lot of the major stories in the New Testament, where we're seeing and interacting with characters that we're familiar with, people like Peter and Matthew, Mary Magdalene, right? But it's not just kind of going verse by verse and just retelling the stories, from the New Testament. And I think that interesting angle adds, kind of a cool element to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I was kind of nervous for it at first because it took me a while to get to it because it did seem like, oh, it's this kind of casual retelling, artistic licenses and all that, but
Hmm.
really, I think they do it in such a very the word you used, immersive, I think is perfect. It's very immersive. It feels like this is definitely how it could have happened.
Yeah.
They're very natural relationships and character developments that make a lot of sense, and you see that especially in season two. Now that the the posse, the crew is all gathered together, and now they're just figuring out what they're supposed to do as these nomads.
Right.
And it's very fun to watch. I would say that season two looks a little higher budget, and I think a lot of it is because it was shot in Goshen. It's a great set, and so that adds to that immersive experience. So that's been really fun to see this time around.
Well, and the nature of the production is different in terms of the financing, right? Because
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's a crowdsourced. The budget is effectively coming from donations, and they're kind of paying as they go in a way.
yeah. No, I love what they're doing with this, and I think putting the religious story aside, just the production is very, very interesting to look at because they're doing things in a totally unique way. It's not unheard of to be financed by fans or anything, but to have something of this high quality just from crowdfunding is pretty incredible, and that they're still generating this revenue from their streaming service, which is also very unique because the way that it works, they have an app, and when you go to the app, you can watch an episode, and it's already been paid for by someone who has donated money to the project, and you can also pay it forward is how it's called, and they're just relying on the generosity of people to keep this project going, and I think it's over halfway through funding for season 3. They have like 8 seasons planned. They're really taking out their time to flesh this story out,
Hmm.
and I think they can do it considering this support that they have. And I think it makes this production really fun to look at too. I follow them on social media, and they have a really great connection with their audience. They're constantly giving updates. They're generating this content of videos, pictures. Here are the highs and lows of this whole production, and it's kind of cool because they are being accountable to their sponsors, right? They're basically
Right.
their producers, right? And
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's been just such a unique, interesting project to follow.
Yeah, the connection between the producers and the audience is very close.
Yeah.
It's almost integral.
Yeah.
And so I think that, the questions of accountability and financing and production, it's really going to be interesting to see if this has a ripple effect elsewhere, especially just coming out of the pandemic. I think that we are poised to see some things change, of course they're already changing, that may be accelerated as a result of, just the advent of technology and the advances there, plus just things that have happened out of obligation because of social distancing and the pandemic itself. And so it will be, I wonder if this kind of a production is going to be looked back on as some kind of a landmark, based on the way that we consume media 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I could totally see that. They're definitely pioneering this new idea that so many people could adopt for their own projects, and it's kind of an interesting idea. Like one team, like one production can create an entire streaming service just for this one show. So who knows the implications there are for that that we'll be able to see for other future media stuff.
Yeah, no, it feels like an opportunity for audiences, and specifically here we're talking about, a religious audience that has particular interests and desires and has criticisms and concerns about a lot of the mainstream media. The opportunity to kind of dictate, this is what I want to see and this is what I want people to produce. And so, you can kind of effectively put your money where your mouth is and say, if this is what you want, then go out and support it, and you can do it directly. And here's this, it's very unique. It's very. I don't want to overuse the word interesting, but I think that there's a compelling element here that, again, I could see it being applied elsewhere as well, because it's certainly not confined to to religious stories or anything like that. It could be applied to all kinds of smaller, more independent productions, and so we'll just have to see where it goes.
Yeah, no, I definitely hope to see more things like that in the future. So that's what I've been able to watch a lot of recently, but I'm really excited to hear what you got to see this week.
That's right. Yeah, so I was able to just see M. Night Shyamalan's new movie, Old, which I am sad to say is probably going to burst the bubble of excitement, sad to say.
Oh.
There are some, it starts off quite well, and it has a really fascinating premise, but it doesn't really deliver in the end. I wouldn't call it a bad movie, but the ending feels more like a shrug than a wow, if that makes sense. And in his genre, because this is very much of his horror suspense thriller style, there's kind of a build and a build and a build and what's going to happen, what's going on, and then the resolution feels logical but kind of unsatisfying. So the story is based around these three different families, and they're all at the same tropical island resort, and they've all been suffering from a variety of mental and physical illnesses and maladies, and the resort management winds up individually recruiting each of the families to get together and go enjoy some time on this private beach that they have. And so they wind up all together in this one location, and one thing leads to another, and they realize that there are these strange properties on this beach that are messing with time. Specifically, it's accelerating time. You know, they're there for a couple of hours, and they discover that their kids are suddenly teenagers, right? The 6-year-old and the 11-year-old are now, you know, 12 and 17 or whatever, and so there's this very kind of compelling question. Well, what is going on here? You know, and who's doing this? Is it, or you know, what's, because they can actually tell that they're being watched, right? They look at the mountains in the distance, and they can see people kind of watching them, but they can't get off of this beach because, you know, when they try to retrace their steps, they wind up having kind of this weird distorting experience that kind of kicks them back there. It's really, when you describe it like this, it's really funky, and it's really funky to watch too, right? It's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and if you are familiar with his style and kind of the way that he presents kind of these curious, strange goings-on in some of his films, it's very much in line with that. And so I think that there will be things, if you consider yourself a fan of his stuff, that will fall right in line with a lot of, you know, what I consider his better movies. But the trouble for me is that after kind of setting the stage in this way, it doesn't really deliver at the end. And I wouldn't even describe it as like a major twist. Like it's not quite a big twist ending, because there's obviously this drive towards resolving why this is happening and what's going on, and it just doesn't really, you know, again, deliver is the term I would use. It actually kind of reminds me of the TV show Lost.
Oh,
which,
okay.
Yeah, a lot of people, there's a very similar setting, a very similar style. I mean, it's effectively the TV show Lost in movie form, and you know, I always felt like Lost was good because it had this really suspenseful story, but then it also had these really great, well-developed characters. And Old feels like it's got the suspenseful story, at least at the beginning, but it doesn't have the time spent on the characters, and it unfortunately ends kind of the way Lost did, which is, you know, that it didn't really solve all those questions and those mysteries in a satisfying way. But where Lost had the characters to kind of enjoy, you know, Old just hasn't really done enough with its characters to, you know, to cross the finish line, so to speak. And so, yeah, I don't know. I was disappointed because I was looking forward to it. And I really liked the idea. I really liked the, you know, and there's some really great things about it. The cinematography is really interesting. There's a lot of kind of creative angles and different things, and just, again, like a lot of potential, but the follow through, you know, the pieces just don't come together. So I'm sorry, your summer is going to be crushed.
Well, I don't know. Well, listen, I'm not too worried because I have a long history of not agreeing with critics when it comes to Shyamalan films, because I am actually a big fan of his films. And even films that aren't considered as popular are some of my favorite ones. The Sixth Sense was one of the last movies that I saw of his. So for me, a lot of his, I don't know, start of decline kind of movies, as they might be framed, are genuinely some of my favorites. And I think it's interesting that you pointed this out with the ending, because I think that's a big focus with his films that kind of does hurt him in the end, because he's never going to get as strong of a twist as he did, like, his first time, you know?
Exactly.
And so, for me, his films haven't necessarily been as much about the twist, as much as they've been just about his style. I love his style. It's so different. We talked last time about how some directors will kind of exploit audiences for we're going to have explosions and action and craziness and just put all that stuff on repeat and call that a movie. Whereas Shyamalan's films are kind of the opposite. They're very slow. They kind of make you think a little bit more, some more than others, granted. I don't necessarily think he's perfect, but, you know, he's striving for something every time. He loves his style. He has this artistic vision, and he's gonna do it whether you end up liking it or not in the end. And I love him for it. I really, really do. So I might be standing alone in that, but
well, I mean, I follow what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying, because I totally agree that he has a very singular and unique style. If you don't want to use the term slow, deliberate is the nice way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's kind of a drawn out, kind of quirky delivery that really seems unique to his movies, and I enjoy that, and I enjoy a lot of his style, and just kind of like the little, the little particular quirks that he uses. The trouble, I think, and again, I mean, it could be for me and for a lot of people who did see Sixth Sense at first, right? So Sixth Sense has the advantage of being not just a unique style, a unique movie in terms of style, but it also has that great story that really culminates in just that shocking finale. And so when his other movies still have the style but don't deliver on the story, it feels like he's coming up short. And I say this as someone who has not been quite as critical as others in terms of his work. I mean, I think that the general trajectory, that I think most people kind of presume for his career is that he started really strong with with The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable was good, if not quite as good, and Signs was pretty good. And then around the time of The Village, I think people started to, and it might have been a kind of a question of fatigue too, because there was a sense of obligation, like, oh, there's got to be some big twist, and so we spend the whole movie anticipating the twist instead of just getting into the story, which could be another point worth exploring. But once we get past The Village, now we're kind of getting in, he's getting away from horror suspense and exploring some other genres, which of course, is totally, encouraged, I would say, for directors. But the movies themselves just didn't seem as satisfying. Now, I never did see The Happening or Last Airbender. I did see Lady in the Water. After Earth was one of the first movies of his that I reviewed professionally, and really just kind of, I was intrigued by the idea, but that one, like, I liked Old a lot more than After Earth, let's put it that way. Like, in spite of its flaws, I enjoyed Old a lot more than After Earth. So the way I see it is those first 3 or 4 films were very much the horror suspense, thriller genre, and then his middle period has kind of gone off in some other directions, which in and of itself obviously was not bad, but the results, I think, were a lot more questionable, and it seems like those were the movies that were much more criticized. Of course, Happening was supposed to be a straight horror movie, right? For me, the turning point recently was The Visit, which felt like a return to his original style and focus, and I really enjoyed The Visit. I don't think it got a really great reception, but I felt like it was him just totally getting back to it. This is what you do well, right? And then Split, I really enjoyed.
Split was fantastic, and I'm glad there is kind of more of a consensus on that. I hope. I think there are some people who are still kind of a little unsure.
No, and Glass, well, Glass, I think people got really excited for because of the end of Split. To kind of think that, oh, there's this tie into Unbreakable, and there's this cool trilogy. Yeah, and it really, in retrospect, I can understand what he was doing logically, but it still felt like kind of a letdown. Of course, Old doesn't have anything to do with any of his other previous movies, but it feels like he's back in more of his traditional territory. And then, critically, I think, and I've heard you suggest as much, that it kind of feels like there are a lot of critics who have just never given him a break since those first few movies. That there's kind of a predetermined attitude, like, oh, it's Shyamalan, it's no good, and this and
Yeah,
that.
no, I'm really nervous about the damage with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the way I see it, um, I really enjoyed his early movies, kind of lost interest midway, and then have been happy to see what he's produced over the last few years, even though they're a little more hit and miss. And I wish that Old was a hit.
Don't worry, dear listeners. It'll probably be a hit for me. I'll be the one writing the review. No.
You'll be one
I
of
think
the
that's
dedicated
fair.
few.
Exactly. I might be the only one. Because, like, I do like a lot of the ones that strayed kind of from his style. I liked seeing him branch out, and I hope that, you know, he's not being forced back into this.
Well, but those were the first ones you saw, right?
True, exactly. So, I mean, like, I watched The Last Airbender when I was a kid, and that was a kid movie, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I was down. I thought the story was great because, you know, the story of the show is fantastic, right? So, yeah, no, I definitely grew up with Shyamalan in a very different sense, and maybe that's, you know, why I have that feeling that I have for him. But I liked what you said about the critics thing, because I'm so sick of the hate, because I do think he's so talented. I don't think it's deserved. You know, he's not a bad director. He's very different, and it's easy to pick on him, you know. But it, you know, I think the criticism has definitely swayed the public opinion. But sometimes the critics don't really have that power over the audience, and the audience chooses to go against what the critics are saying, and there's kind of this dissonance between the two, right? And I've found that really fascinating. Like, I've kind of stopped looking at Rotten Tomato scores because it feels like so many times there's, you know, these clashing opinions, and I just want to pick your mind.
Yeah,
on that.
no, well, it's interesting that you use the term power. I've never really, you know, certainly from my own, you know, my own modest reach, I've never really felt like I had much power over the success or failure of a movie. But I follow what you mean, what you're saying though, because I think that there is a debate. You know, Superman versus Batman, I think from a few years, or was it Batman versus Superman? I can't remember which one.
Whichever
The one from a few years
superhero you
ago.
prefer.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Well, I know. Yeah, I mean, I know that there was a debate as to whether or not the negative critical response had an impact on the actual monetary success of the movie. You know, and
Interesting.
which is, yeah. Well, I certainly think it's worth a debate.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of smirk at it myself, because most of the impression that I've gotten over the years as I've done this professionally is that, you know, more often than not, people tend to be kind of cynical about, you know, the opinions of critics. You know, I've heard on numerous occasions people say, "Oh, it's just critics. What do critics know? Critics don't know anything." And so there's this, like you say, there's kind of this weird dissonance between the world of critics and what they're saying versus the audiences, which is really kind of sad, because you would assume, right, that the purpose of a critic is to, you know, see, you know, there's supposed to be a connection between the critics and the audience, just to say, okay, well, we're going to go out and see these movies, and we're going to help you decide which ones are worth your time, right? And so it's a service, right?
Yeah.
There's a relationship there. There should be a relationship there where you are, as a critic, working on behalf of your readers to give them good information and direction and that. And I think that I mean, I've tried to maintain that. You know, I especially was really particular about that when I was reviewing a lot of kids movies, because obviously it's not for me, but I'm trying to think of, you know, what's the best, you know, what do the parents need to know here, you know, because not everybody's going to go see as many movies as I am, and when you see 3, 4, 5 movies in a week, you know, you're going to have a different experience than somebody who's just going a few times a year. And I think that's part of the source of that dissonance, is that, you know, something that might just be totally harmless and enjoyable for your everyday audience member might be something that I'll see and just think, oh my gosh, they're doing this again. Here's this cliche and this cliche and this cliche, because I'm seeing it 36 times in a year as opposed to the one time when, this, hypothetical audience member just goes to see a movie. And so there's definitely this gap and there's this separation, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of tragic because I feel like, yes, I'm giving my opinion, and yes, there's a style and a performance to writing a good review, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I'm still supposed to be offering a service. I'm supposed to be giving something of value, and if things are so bad that people are just going to automatically kind of dismiss the idea of anything that a critic says, and I don't think it's quite that bad, but it's a dysfunctional relationship. Let's say that. It's a dysfunctional relationship.
Well, hopefully we can do what we can to repair the relationship, but I'm definitely on the side of the cynicism towards critics, I think, and the thing that, and unfortunately I haven't seen this with you, Josh, I do think you're one of the good ones out there.
Well,
but no, but sometimes I see critics kind of do this, I don't know, they're like, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, and so this review I saw on Rotten Tomatoes for The Boss Baby Family Business, which is one of the movies that I saw, and I wrote a review on, and I loved it. I thought it was fun. It was just hilarious, very solid story. And the critic consensus says it's more C-level than C-suite, but as a painless diversion for the kids, The Boss Baby manages some decent family business. So, probably felt very good about writing that, like, oh, I'm so clever. Mm-hmm. But then the audience says, cute animation, funny jokes, and a strong family message make The Boss Baby Family Business a solid sequel with all ages appeal. So, for me, like, what I want out of a review is not necessarily as much of a rating, though I do think there's something to be said for having some kind of ranking system so you know how things compare.
Right.
But, what I want is, like, I want to know kind of what I'm walking into because, like you were saying with Old, you're like, I didn't like the ending, but if you like M. Night Shyamalan, you're probably going to like this. So I probably will like Old, based on what you're saying, because I love his style. I don't necessarily care as much about the twist, right? So, having a critic review where it's like, there's no detail. It's like, well, why do you think it's, this C level? It's just a painless diversion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what about the story? What about the style? And, as a critic, I think what makes them valuable is that they have more experience, more expertise, and, we can pick up on more things because it's like, oh, we know about cinematography, we know about the color schemes and the editing and camera angles, and we should be using those things as evidence, right? So
yeah,
that's
no,
something
I think there are a
me.
couple, right, and it should be, and I think there are a couple things that are going on that might be responsible for this dysfunction. First of which is in very practical terms, as a critic, you not only have to give a verdict on a film, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, 3 stars, ABC, whatever. You kind of have to, well, not just back it up, but you have to fill content. Especially if you are writing for the paper, website, whatever. You have to give specifics and details, and so as you're going to go into movies looking for things and looking a lot closer at things than you would be if you were just kind of a casual viewer. And so I think that's why, I think with something like Boss Baby, which I didn't say, and so I can't vouch for either side in terms of the evaluation, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that the audience who is just going to see an enjoyable kids movie would walk away and say, oh yeah, no, that was cute, that was fine, that was kind of sweet. But then the critics who were kind of digging into it, and this is kind of the second point I would make, is that not only are they looking for content, but there also has to be kind of a gradation or a spectrum where, if I'm going to give 4 stars to, and I don't know if this is the, getting away from kids animation, but like if I'm going to give 4 stars to a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is just like this incredible, amazing action movie, then when something like The Mummy comes along, the Brendan Fraser movies, which are perfectly fine, and are fun and kind of enjoyable and stuff, but I'm sorry, that's no Raiders of the Lost Ark, and so that can't be 4 stars, right? So it has to be less, and then so maybe that's a 3-star movie, and then along comes the Tom Cruise Mummy movie, right? And okay, well, this has got some real flaws, and so suddenly now we got to get down to like 2 stars or 1 star or something. And whereas if you just walk in to see the Tom Cruise movie, it might just be perfectly fine because it's, oh, well, this is just, it's not great. It's not one of my all-time favorite movies, but it's fine, right? And so I think that a lot of times the audience score will reflect not that something is awesome, but that it's perfectly good, it's perfectly passable, but then in reflection, they'll also acknowledge that, okay, well, yeah, it's not nearly as good as some of these other ones. Whereas when you're evaluating as a critic, you kind of feel like you have to establish that scale. And that's kind of what I encountered a lot when I was reviewing a lot of the kids' movies. Is a lot of these movies are just perfectly fine. They're sweet, they're cute, they got a nice message, whatever. But if the family's only going to go see a couple movies a year, and if they got to pay for tickets for everybody and food and all this kind of stuff, I'm not going to give my full endorsement to, a lesser movie if I know that a Pixar's around the corner, or something that's really worthwhile. And so I don't know that completely explains the difference between.
But it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it is kind of sad, right? Because you would think that there would be more of a consensus, and a lot of times there is. I mean, I think with a lot of movies, it's pretty obvious that, oh yeah, well, this is a good movie or this is a bad movie, right? But there are enough of these kind of odd exceptions where the audience response is really high and the critics hated it, or vice versa, that we kind of question. What exactly is going on here?
Which is why I think, having those details really help out. But, what I'm thinking with you saying this is that it's kind of almost as if we have this finite amount of 4s and 1s we could give out during a year. So, you have to, as a critic, you have to be more selective, right? Whereas average moviegoer, it's like, oh, that was amazing, and that was the only one I saw this year, So... I think that's a fair point with it. And it's easy to tell when it's going to be like the 4-star or the 1-star, typically, like something that's really, really great or really bad.
Yeah.
But it's the in-between stuff that I think where we see a lot of the debate happening. And a great example for this, another movie that I saw recently, was The Tomorrow War, which is on Amazon Prime. And it's definitely a streaming service kind of movie. From what I can tell, like, it has a lot of problems, but it has so many things in it that it's so good, too. So I feel really torn, where it's like, there's so many good and bad things. Like, I don't know if I would rate it highly or low because, it had those great things going for it, but other things I can't vouch for. So
no, and this I think that what you're describing is perfect, because if you look closely enough at something, you're going to notice that almost even with really, really good movies or really, really bad movies, you're going to find things to like and things to dislike, right?
Yeah.
It's very rare that it's going to be perfect.
Or perfectly bad.
Well, and I think what is difficult is when either as a critic or an audience member, you're obligated to boil it down to just one single verdict, right? Because if it's got a lot of good things going, but then there's kind of a little exception. You know, and I spent years trying to figure out exactly where, you know, what a 2.5-star movie meant versus a 3 or a 3.5. You know, I mean, I kind of felt like, well, a 3-star movie is a good movie. It's not a great movie, but it's perfectly fine, and I don't have any problem endorsing it, right? If you saw me give something 3 stars, that's what that meant. If it was 3.5 stars, that meant it impressed me. You know, it was good, but it was more than good, and it was something that stood out and looked like they were making an extra effort, and it was something that, you know, I would more enthusiastically endorse, you know, and the 4 stars were pretty rare. You know, it was just something that, okay, I really just was knocked out by this. This is something really special. And, you know, and then the 2.5, I mean, sometimes it felt like I could give 9 out of 10 movies 2.5 stars, right? Because you're definitely giving credit for the good, right? And there's definitely some good elements going on here. You know, I think of Old as a 2.5-star movie because there are some things that I really liked about it, and things that I really enjoyed, things that I know that, you know, just based on what you're telling me, I think you're really going to like about this movie. But just by virtue of the fact that, you know, 10 years from now, you're going to go down your list of Shyamalan movies or just kind of thriller suspense movies in general, and it's not Sixth Sense, and it's not Unbreakable, and it's not even, you know, The Visit. And so while I can see an objection to panning it, right, saying, you know, it's not a terrible movie, it's not a bad movie, but it's not as good as it could have been. And I think that will become more and more clear, even if in the initial viewing, you know, because if a lot of critics are just kind of nailing it to the wall and saying, oh, this is terrible, I think I looked at it this morning, I think it was like 6.2 on IMDb or something, you know, which is a little less than I would give it, but that doesn't surprise me that it lands there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, so I'll be, you know, maybe the next time we record, you'll have to tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like your take on that, how critic kind of has to be a little more picky in some ways.
Right. Well, and on behalf of the audience, I mean, that's kind of my point.
True.
Is that you know, I feel like, you know, and it's not just purely a pride thing where, you know, because I have to I feel accountable for, if I endorse something, you know, that's I'm pinning my credibility on that, and if I give the thumbs up to a piece of crap, you know, that reflects poorly on me. But beyond that, it's, you know, not that it's all about money, but honestly, I mean, if I'm endorsing a movie and telling, you know, mom and dad to go take all 4 kids and to buy all the popcorn and the drinks and the candy, and even if they're going with a matinee, I mean, that's still going to be a pretty expensive outing.
Absolutely.
You know, money's important. You know, people are on a budget, and so if I'm going to tell people to go see something, I am thinking about those kind of questions. I don't know that all critics are. You know, I'm sure there are a lot who aren't. But that's something, you know, I don't know. I can ultimately only speak for myself.
Yeah. Oh, I think maybe, I don't know, for me, because, you know, I understand the reputation thing. Like, I'm nervous about declaring my love for Shyamalan films, right? But, you know, that is a personal thing for me, right? So, I don't know, it's very rare for me to really dislike a film. I think there are so many things to point out that are good. I like staying positive about it because, you know, it's such a cool industry and there's so much hard work that goes into it. And
I could give you a list of movies if you want to hate some stuff.
Oh,
I can give you plenty.
There are a few for sure. But like, I mean, I think for me, that's why I say, like, I really want to be detailed because, like, for me, I think tastes are so different across the board where if I can at least communicate what a person might like and what a person might not like in a film, then they can be the judge, you know? And I feel like that's more my stance. And I'm a person who likes playing devil's advocate quite a lot, so maybe there's a bit of that too, where it's like, well, I'm gonna like this because there is this good stuff to be found. So,
so
you know?
you're saying you're a Shyamalan fan out of spite.
Hey, I was a Shyamalan fan before hearing all the haters, okay? The other stuff is out of spite. Don't come after me with the Shyamalans. We'll go down that road if we need to. But
well, hey, so speaking of coming after you,
oh gosh,
I heard we got a comment. I heard we got some feedback.
Yeah, we did.
In the early days of the Utah Film Pod, we got a reaction.
We did it. We made it. And it's great because we made it out in Germany. That's where we got it from.
Nice.
But yeah, no, absolutely. With that talk about, we're here for the audience and everything. We really care about what our audience has to say. So this is from Jacob, talking about what we were saying with the Real Housewives of the North Pole, and how you and I are both kind of a little apprehensive about the project because if it's not self-aware enough, it might be off-putting for us, right? So Jacob here says, I do want to say that I disagree the point about reality TV. I mean, isn't the whole point of parody of that sort is that it's aimed at people who enjoy that kind of content or have had so much exposure to it that you can recognize and laugh at the tropes. If you don't know the Real Housewives, why would you go see a parody of it? And I thought it was interesting because, I am intrigued to see the parody because I like things that make fun of other things because I love tropes. I think they're interesting, But I think it's interesting because he's kind of calling us out for two things, I feel like. One is, the target audience. And we talked about this last time with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. We're not the target audience for it. That's not our thing. But the second thing is that he called this a parody, whereas we were talking more about it being satire last time. And satire, I feel like, it's trying to make a point about it, whereas parody, it's just kind of like what he said, it's just replicating, and you're laughing at the replication, not necessarily on any statement they're making for it. And it made me think of this SNL sketch that I love. It's Kylo Ren as an undercover boss. And so it's not commentary on the undercover boss show, nor on Star Wars. It's just, hey, what if we took these two things and combined them? But the difference being that was a 5-minute sketch. And if it's a full-length film about Real Housewives, might not be our seed, and that's okay. So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts with that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with the idea that, that the satire and the parody is meant for fans, and so they're going to be able to appreciate it more. I guess it's a matter of just two different audiences, right? Because of my feelings about reality television, or at least this branch of it, right? Because there are so many different variations. But I just, would find more satisfaction in just something scathing about it because I just find it so repulsive, and so I guess if the target audience is reality fans, then it makes sense to want to mirror that style. I guess you would make something else for people who just despise the reality television, or maybe there's a way to walk that line. All I can say is that I've had multiple experiences where even though I could recognize the humor and the talent and the skill behind the satire or parody, it was just giving me the same reaction that I had to kind of the original stuff, right? The subject matter. And so I don't know. I guess I agree and disagree at the same time. I totally understand the point, and I think it is a good point. That doesn't make me want to.
we agree with you, Jacob. We just don't want to see it. That's what it comes down to.
Maybe that's the best way. Oh dear. Well, maybe I don't know if this is a good response, but it did pop to mind, so it might be worth throwing out there.
Sure.
So without going into too much detail or depth, I can't stand the Pitch Perfect movies. I absolutely hated them, and it was such a cathartic experience to watch the Honest trailer for the Pitch Perfect series, because I just loved the fact that, oh, thank goodness, somebody else sees what I see and understands what is driving me crazy about these stupid movies. And maybe that's not the truest, I mean, it's not necessarily it's not a parody of those movies, it's a parody of a movie trailer, right? And so I guess if I hated movie trailers, and I kind of do actually, maybe I would have more of a problem with the Honest trailer format itself, but yeah, I don't know. So that's why I say I guess it's related and unrelated, but just I don't know. Sometimes there's satisfaction in knowing that other people recognize the madness, that you are not the crazy one, that you're not taking crazy pills, as Mugatu might have said.
Well, that's why there's like a lot of people who are like hate fans, right? They like hate watching a movie, so maybe we'll just get together and we'll hate watch Real Housewives at the North Pole and just enjoy trashing on it and everything.
I don't know, let me get back to you on that one.
Oh, that sounds good.
Years ago, I heard, and I've always kicked myself because I've never been able to pin down the exact source of this. I heard it on the radio, I think it was NPR. But I heard somebody say once that the ideal satirist is someone who has one eye on society's foibles and the other eye on society's potential. And so I've always loved the idea that satire and parody can be a positive thing and an uplifting thing. And it's supposed to be us kind of laughing at ourselves, as opposed to so much of what our humor is today, which is snark and just kind of, not that sarcasm itself is bad, but just kind of this bitter, nasty sarcasm that I think is really pervasive. I like the idea that we all need to be able to kind of laugh at ourselves, and when that comes through, I think that's really valuable. And so I definitely think that there can be some nice potential to this this Housewives project. I definitely understand the argument and agreed with it to a point. But I can definitely say that, if I just feel like I'm watching another episode of the thing that I hate, maybe it's not doing its job, if that's what it is.
We really appreciate the comments, and if any of you guys have any comments on this episode, please go to our YouTube channel, utah.film, dot is all spelled out, and comment on this episode. What you think? Keep the conversation going.
No, we absolutely want to hear what you guys have to say. We'll be putting up new content on utah.film, our website, reviews for movies like Old and other things that are going on, and so be sure to check that out. And in the meantime, we'll be working up some material for podcast number 3. And until then, thanks so much for spending time with us. And Dani, any final thoughts?
Just thank you for coming back, and we're excited to keep this going.
That's nice. Maybe we'll run into you in Bicknell. All right. Take care.